Okay, nice to meet you. So I tried to prepare a somewhat more lighter and enjoyable presentation for you. I hope you will enjoy it. My presentation is about cities and everyday life. So today we all know that cities are becoming increasingly crowded. The share of urban population is rapidly growing around the world. With the increasing density of human population, the inner city areas, the daily living becomes more complex. We know that it is more than 60% of world population that lives in cities, and in many parts of the world, population becomes urbanized. This means that there had been a great migration from rural areas to the cities, and cities continues to grow. So when you think of a city, what is a city composed of? Firstly, we all know that it is composed of physical structures like buildings, roads, bridges. These all will be the subject of our departments, of our professions, architects, interior architects, and us city planners. But it is not only the physical structures that compose the city. It is above all people. You know, we are like urban inhabitants, individuals, or different social groups like the smallest group may be families, but there are also groupings like ethnic groups, cultural communities, neighborhood communities, social classes, different work groups, interest groups, subculture groups, many of them. And there are also institutions like governments, municipalities, ministries, or more informal institutions that in a way organize the way cities are functioning. The life we are living is somewhat ruled, governed by institutions that we have founded ourselves. And there is also an ineluctable part of cities and urban life. It is nature and geography. Where the city is located is very important. It is something that defines the urban life too. And another thing is that as people living in a physical or geographical environment, we have our practices of our own and the meanings that we put to these cities. So these associated practices and meanings compose the daily living of a city. And when we think of all these factors together, they are composing the city, in fact, and they shape what we call the everyday life of the city. Well, it is a bit difficult to define everyday life, but you know that it is where the rush and struggle of living and working takes place. And it is an important dimension of urban living. Within it, the city actually functions in a way. The urban environment and spaces are actually produced. All the physical environment gain meaning with the way we are using it. And people are actually representing or expressing themselves in a way. And they communicate with each other in the environment of the city. It is where the urban life goes on. And everyday life has indeed a great potential, and it hides, in a way, hidden stories in it. So we know that practices and meanings are produced within the daily living, and the life in the city goes on according to a plethora of rules set by administrations and institutions and decisions taken by the decision makers. This means they tell us where to go to work, where to walk from, where to take the bus, where to live, and so on. It also goes on according to the daily practices of the inhabitants. It is somewhat, we see sometimes these rules are broken in our daily living. So if we have in the organization of the everyday life rules set by institutions and administrations, there are norms, which defines what is right and wrong, what is to be done or not to be done, which are set by communities and societies. And there are our daily practices. And if we start to think more about everyday life, we can not only define it by the independent practices of ourselves. If we talk about the life of a city, it is composed of the practices of many, many people, in fact, its population, but also it is composed of the interactions between these different urban actors. The way they come together, the way they collaborate, the way they fight with each other, all of these, in fact, compose the everyday life of the city. There is also sometimes the power play between different individuals or institutions or authorities. All of these experiences of us, of the urban inhabitants, is in fact what turns a built structure into a real city, a dynamic phenomenon. Although the everyday life is accepted as an ordinary, a banal, common, habitual, or neglectable thing, when we talk about something daily, it's sounds like something useless or unnoticeable, but in fact it is where the most unexpected is found. Most of all, above all, there is a great creativity in the city and in the streets of the city, and it is sometimes far beyond the patented inventions of science-men or other technological engineers and so on. It is far from being standardized. You can never guess what is going to happen in a city. It always has something surprisingly new, and it is always new to the newcomer. For instance, this creativity can be found in street fashion, the way we are dressing up. In fact, it is a way of demonstrating ourselves, an identity, or expressing oneself. Street fashion, for instance, provides more novelty than the monopolistic international or multinational fashion firms. The inventions of street fashion sometimes can be appropriated, taken by the fashion giants, and used. The most exciting place of street fashion may be Japan, for instance, or other places. This is one form of creativity. But there is also a creativity that is related to the simple but also challenging struggles of living in the city. In their daily living, people face numerous problems with which they have to deal with by themselves. The urban community itself develops creative solutions to the challenging struggle of living in the city. These compose the daily practices of the city. In a way, people develop their own tactics and methods to deal with these daily problems. Sometimes instant problems need instant solutions. As contemporary problems rise, up-to-date methods of dealing with them should be developed. So we know now that as people living in the city, as individuals living in the city, or as groups living in the city, we have the ability and capacity to produce throughout our acts, approaches, throughout our characters, decisions, choices, our creativity, ingenuity, the way we operate or the way we simply live may be a solution to these problems we are facing. And the moment when problems are faced, the creativity of individuals or groups become important. They have to be creative and they have to have access to the tacit knowledge of the urban daily living. After this part, we are going to see more examples upon this creativity in the daily life. Because in general, every urban settlement has its own accumulation of knowledge, ways of acting, and urban culture, in fact, is developed in every city, which has developed in response to the unique problems of the locality. And this accumulated knowledge is called the tacit knowledge. So what kind of problems these may be? Every urban population have to deal with the environmental or demographic or financial conditions of the locality in which they are living. So, first of them may be the dealing with environmental problems. It is necessary for many societies or populations to live, to adapt to the geographic and ecological conditions. For instance, in Cambodia, it is difficult to, let's say, found cities on river because the water level is constantly changing. In some periods of the year it is increasing, rising, and in some it is going down. So the way people live in Cambodia is in a way shaped by the movements of that water. And the daily practices also are formed in that way. Like little boats are an inseparable part of their lives. They even invented a floating cafe in the village of Kampong, for instance. Instead of erecting it on stilts, some residents flow with the waters. And in that village, the lake is served as the primary thoroughfare. Neighbors visit themselves, each other, in floating boats. Even stores are in form of boats, and so on. And another example comes from our own city, Ankara, for instance. In Sakarya, sometimes when minor problems such as where to walk, when to commute, where to stand, where to eat, or where to sit cause great inconveniences to the daily living of people, urban residents develop their own tactics and methods to deal with them. They develop their own ways of acting, operating, using, and so on. For answering the basic problem of carrying some loads in Ankara, so our people have developed these wired mobile transporters. Everywhere in Sakarya, for instance, you can see them for carrying parcels or for carrying other stuff. We know that Sakarya is a pedestrian area and it is difficult to carry heavy stuff on your hands. So even this has become a business itself. A true creation, invention of our people. Well, there are other things around the world, many other examples around the world, like the problem of dealing with the crowd and traffic. In Asia, for instance, I am sure you have seen or heard of them. It is a very crowded street, and we see that people are carrying their stuff, their loads on their heads. And there is also an invention which is called tuk-tuk. It is like a motorbike drawn carriage. It is sometimes drawn by bicycles too. But in Southern Asia, when you go there, when you go to their cities, you get close to using these. So in Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, all different types of these motorcycle carriages are used, and each of them, in fact, is a design of its own, is a creation, an invention of its own. It is flexible, lighter, and it has different variations. Another way of public transportation, let's say, it is drawn by a motorbike again, and it carries a lot of people. Because the city is so crowded and probably the public transportation is not functioning very well, this is the solution which is developed by the people of that area. There are also sometimes economic problems that we are dealing with, like lack of capital, lack of money. And And in time, well, in different parts of the world, and also in Turkey, we have developed different, again, solutions to them. Like these pop-up restaurants in Thailand. Whenever, well, a chef is putting out his cuisine, little kitchen somewhere and put up some tables and stores, then people come to eat and it becomes a pop-up restaurant. One way that we are familiar with is the street vending, in fact, the ishporta. It is again born out of the difficult conditions, economic conditions of living in the city. Isn't it? Because we know that we can find in Kızılay, for instance, cheaper products from the ishporta dealers. And they have to be mobile, they have developed their own ways to like escape from the police control and so on. And again, facing the problem of, let's say, control, municipal control, well, the street vendors developed their own stores, mobile stores, and the police also, or the zabıta also developed their flexible methods of dealing with the street vendors. So there they become more, let's say, easy to follow the vendors. Another problem, it's an interesting story coming from India, and it is called the dabawalas. This is in fact a food service, a catering service, let's say, which is very common in India, and it means in fact box person. It is a let's say it's a solution developed for the lack of time, the problem of lack of time, because it is very difficult to travel from one part of the city to the other part. It takes a long time, and when you go to work, you don't have the time to go to home and eat or go to another place to eat because there is no time. So there is a system developed. It is a food service. It is transported by bicycles or other transportation methods, and it's those people take the food and bring them to the employees, to the workers of the city, and in that way the people are free from dealing with the traffic and the length commutes and so on. So instead of going home for lunch or paying for a meal and eating out every day in a cafe or somewhere, many office workers have cooked a cooked meal sent either from their home or sometimes from a caterer who essentially cooks and delivers the meal in lunch boxes, and then have the empty lunch boxes collected and resent the same day. This is in fact a very complex system of food catering. Lots of loads of food are sent by trains to different parts of the city, and in order to recognize the address they are going to be sent, well, the Dabawala people have developed some kind of a signing of their own, coding, numbers, the colors, all show the destination station and the address of the customer. And this works flawless, in fact, as it is said. It works flawless, there is no problem, and many people have their lunch with the help of the Dabavalas. Another way of dealing with economic problem, lack of capital, let's say, comes from Bulgaria. So in Bulgaria, in the recent decades, the rents became very high, so people cannot access to proper shops like in another city. So in the basements of apartments, they have developed these basement shops, like liquor shops or tobacco shops or like a grocery shop. It is like that. It is open in the morning and people just make their commerce by kneeling down. And in the night, with this flexible and modular production, they close the, let's say, the kiosk, and the shop is closed. And this has become a very widely used solution in that city, because the rents are high, basements are cheaper. So why not opening a shop in a basement window? Mobility and nomadity are also different ways of dealing with the urban life. We know that as urban areas grow denser and as the urban living working conditions get harder, there is greater need for flexibility and mobility in cities. And mobility becomes useful, especially in the provision of certain services. For instance, in the example of street vendors. As urban areas grow denser and as the urban living conditions get harder, there is greater need for flexibility and mobility in cities. We know that it is also in our past experiences, in our culture. For instance, in Asia, there are nomad tribes or families still living a nomadic life, but they also adapted to the new technologies of today. For instance, here is a solar panel for producing energy. They don't have a constant house, but they can carry their source of energy in the back of their oxes. These are the contemporary conditions of nomads in Asia. So when the tent is settled somewhere, all the energy system is also set, and for a while this family lives in that place. They may also be a nomadic living in the boat, and so on. And this way of living, in fact, is adapted to the daily life of our cities too. For instance, we have the services that travel. Well, we know that mobility becomes useful, especially in the provision of certain services, like street vendors, the itinerant vendors, the restaurants, theaters, libraries, or clinics are established examples to such practices. Such public or private services traveling around the city bring resources to urban inhabitants that otherwise have no or limited access to. Mobility is also profitable for service deliverers who do not have any stable location or capital. Mobile service provision is also flexible in time and space. In fact, it is based on architecture that is carried, a mobile architecture. The mobile architecture, the traveling object, the users, and the chosen point of station produce the temporary, impermanent spaces of these practices and daily life. Again, some examples from the past. A form of traveling entertainment in in past Iran, it is called Şehri-Farang. A student of mine has introduced me this example. And this means, the word means Şehri-Farang, is the cities of the West. So in 19th century or 18th century, maybe, when people have no access to the West, there were some owners of these machines who travels and show people the images of the world and exotic places that those people have no opportunities to see. For the Middle Easterners, the West was the exotic place. So the Şehri-Farang, the showman, showed them the images of the Western countries. Another example, I am sure that your mothers maybe or fathers have told you stories about these mobile swings, turning swings, which is called the sekodins. I know that my mother has told me many stories about some Bayram days where the sekodins were put on public squares and so on, that people were enjoying it. This is also a practice that is continuing today. So there is a newspaper clip who says, that the children were very happy to see the Sekolin and everybody went to play with it. Another example again from our history is the Orta Oyunu, as you know. It turns the city instantly into a place of theater. And when it is removed from that place, the city turns back to its normal daily life. And today there are some, let's say, interpretations of these forms of practices, like mobile restaurants. It is frequently seen now in different parts of the world, let's say. A traveling restaurant. I know that sometimes in front of our university too, there is a mobile food seller. There used to be last year, at least. Or a mobile trampoline, which is carried easily. Or mobile party equipments, like sound systems. And others. Different examples can be seen. And another way of dealing with the everyday life of the city comes from an intervention of some groups, and what they do is called the guerrilla gardening. So these people, as a response to the dullness or the lack of greenery or let's say flowers in the city, they carry their own flowers, they pot them in the spots they want at night without the control of the government. They beautify, in a way, the public gardens and roadsides and so on. And this has become a big phenomenon in Europe, in fact, which is called guerrilla gardening. All of these ways, all of these inventions and creations are also adapted in the design practice. As future, let's say, designers yourselves, you are also responsible for following what people are in need for. Like the former phone boxes, which are no longer of use because we all have our cellular phones now. In New York, if I'm not wrong, yes, in New York, well, somebody, an artist, have started to turn these phone boxes into mini libraries. So everybody can share their own books in these little libraries. And this is the work of a designer artist. Or there are also like products as mobile homes or tents, where you carry your own home with yourself, or different designs like that, or like that. So this man does not have to have a home, own a home. He lives where he goes, for instance, and it has everything in it, in a way. So the design is explained as a response to the lack of land, house in the China, for instance, as it is very expensive and overpopulated. This design office have come up with a solution of a mobile house like that. And you can even like put different mobile houses together and create your own neighborhood in a public square. Why not? So this was all. I hope you have enjoyed the presentation, and if you have questions, I am happy to answer. Türkçe konuşmak isteyen varsa Türkçe devam edebiliriz. Evet, bölümlerin hani sadece teknik ve sıkıcı değil ya da şehir dediğimizde sadece şehir ve bölge planlama. Aslında çok dinamik süreçleri de içerdiğini size göstermek istedim bu sunumda. Umarım hevesle eğitiminize devam edersiniz. Çeşitli derslere giriyorum. Bir tane değil, birinci sınıf stüdyosunda yer alıyorum. Temel tasarımda, şehir planlamada. Bu sene iç mimarlarla beraber yürüttük ama seneye belki nüfusumuz artarsa ayrılabilir. Ondan sonra teknik çizim, ondan sonra kentleşmenin kökeni, kentsel coğrafya. Bir de seçmeli dersim vardı bu konuyla ilgili. Gündelik hayat ve şehir diye. İşte çeşitli derslerde belki buluşma fırsatımız olacak.
Ben de böyle ağzın açık olacak, gözlerini açacaksın böyle.
Ben gözlük taktırmadım. Senin saçların çok gerçekten ama o iyi benim bir şey çok şey yapalım. Adam orada onu çekti. Evet, evet. Gibi görüyorum.
Elinizde de şöyle bir şey oldu. Her yer öyle. Ne çok acı orası. Bu herhalde tarihi bir bölümü değil mi? Evet, şehirlere sığamıyoruz artık yani bir yandan. Zaten öyle şeyler de çıkmaya başladı. Geri... Evet, bir de ya da artık şehir hayatından çok fazla böyle yeni şeyler, köyler, ekip köyler falan yapıyoruz. Direkt şehir temposundan kaçan, hatta kendi sistemini kuran böyle şeyler yıllar oluşuyor. Öyle valla, bu şehir dönemin bu, çelişkisi bu. Şehir mi, kent, kır mı? Kıra dönüş.